Hello and welcome to On the Kerbs Pub Chat. I am your host, Thiemo Albers-Daly, and joining me this week is On the Kerbs Pub Chat co-host slash regular, Mr. Jacob Phillips. How are you?
I'm doing absolutely amazingly well. Somewhat excited, although as you know, Timo, my expectations are a little calmer this year. But I can't wait to get this juicy episode off our chest, and it's going to be somewhat, I think, and I hope, therapeutic because it's been a long time coming.
Therapeutic is the word, but it's not just us for this one because we also have motorsport journalist from Pit Debrief and Everything F1, Chiara Martin, with us. How are you? And welcome to the podcast as well.
I'm doing good as well. As I spoke to you both earlier, I am a bit tired because I had to hand in my thesis and do all my final exams. And last week has pretty much been quite hectic for all of us motorsport journalists out there. So yeah, still trying to recover from all of that.
This is part of the recovery process, I feel like, because there's, like you say, so much has been happening that it's been hard to process some of it. And I mean, this isn't the topic of this podcast, but we're all trying to figure out, did Lewis actually join Ferrari? But we'll wrap our heads around that another time, I think, because we're back for the first time this year to tackle one of the other massive topics to come out of F1 in the last couple of years, essentially the will they, won't they relationship between Formula One and Andretti Cadillac. And before we dive right into the deep end, because I can already tell Jacob's chomping at the bit, I thought that it'd be good to just briefly recap the timeline of events of everything that's happened so far, kind of previously on ER style, and explain to those listening who may not know how the heck we ended up here. So I will ramble on for just a couple more minutes and then I'll throw to you two because I don't need to talk for all of this. But we kind of started almost 2 years ago, if you can believe it, back on the 18th of February 2022, when Mario Andretti announced that his son Michael, who we also know pretty much from all of his motorsport stuff, had filed an application to join Formula One, and everyone got pretty excited about that prospect. And in due course, they did get some support from other F1 teams, principally McLaren and Alpine. And then, less than a year later, Andretti announced that in order to bolster their efforts to get into Formula One, they'd be partnering up with General Motors and Cadillac, which was making an already mouth-watering prospect even more mouth-watering if that was possible. And then last year, the application process closed, with several teams apparently bidding to enter F1, but details on all of that was a little bit here and there, and we're still not 100% sure officially of a lot of stuff, which just seems odd in itself, but we'll get to that. And the important thing was that the FIA then approved Andretti Cadillac's bid, passing it over to F1 and Liberty for kind of final approval, which is also going to be an interesting point of contention for later. And all of this kind of came in the midst of fans calling it for it to happen. I think it's been one of the few things ever in F1 history that nearly every F1 fan has agreed upon in terms of wanting this to happen. Andretti Cadillac themselves have been building state-of-the-art facilities in order to get prepared and also again hiring people. F1 teams then started being a bit more vocal in their views that they believed that Andretti Cadillac shouldn't join Formula One, them receiving a smaller piece of the pie, seemingly the main concern there, as annoyingly obvious as that might have been. And then, of course, we fast forward to just last month, 31st of January of this year, F1 rejecting Andretti Cadillac's application to join the series with, what's the polite word? Some interesting reasons for the rejection. I'm going to try and be behaved to start off with before descending into what is probably going to be chaos, but I want to get your initial thoughts on this one.
Yeah, interesting is the word you used there. I'll be slightly polite for now before, like you say, we delve into it, and we'll take the last point you made there on the 31st of January was the day that they, for me, a little bit of my love for F1 sadly died. And although I'll try to rekindle it over the next season or two, and hopefully that there's a resolution to this, but for me, the F1 tagline you see on all their social medias is, the risk takers, the late breakers, the history makers, and all the messaging we've had from FOM, from Liberty, from Stefano Bindicali isn't that. And F1's always been about teams taking risks. We've had teams over the 70 years joining, cars used to be built in literal back gardens and garages. And then you had the likes of Benetton, who are a closed company, come and win the World Championship. You had the Brawn documentary, which if you haven't seen it, I watched it the other day for the first time. Absolutely fantastic.
And you needed that the other day. That was perfect timing.
Yes, it was a little bit of respite, and reminded me why I did love F1 and still could if things change. But and they bought a team for £1. They bought the Honda Works outfit, and then they won the World Championship. And we've had other teams giving it a go, like Caterham, like Marussia, who didn't go so well. But that's what it's all about. It's giving it a chance. separating those teams that are good versus those teams that gave it a go, but ultimately fall by the wayside. It's a chance for, as we saw with Daniel Ricciardo, who joined a small team called HRT, Hispania, who fell off the grid after 3 years, but still he was given that opportunity. And we're a sport that desperately needs more seats with the amount of talent that me and you, Thiemo, especially see on a weekly basis in Formula 2, Formula 3, and we're crying out for more drivers to get that chance. And it's it really made me sad. I think I messaged you, didn't I, straight away saying, they've done it. And you were like, what's going on now? Because I always moan about F1 to you, and it's normally something fairly trivial most of the time. But this was the big one that we were talking about back and forward for months. And you said, oh, it probably will happen. And I said, oh, I don't know. And I was being negative.
Well, one of us has to be optimistic in this relationship, and it's not going to be you.
Yeah. It's not. It probably never will be me. And, sadly, Thiemo, I was proved right. Not that I wanted to be, but a very sad day for Formula One. It made them look very bad. It still makes them look bad. And they were very, very lucky that Lewis Hamilton joined Ferrari the next day. Although I'm sure we might all have an opinion on this. I think that might not be a coincidence.
No, this is something I messaged you about, Chiara, pretty much the day after, I think, of the Lewis news. We were talking about what a week it had been. And I think, like Jacob was saying, the Brawn documentary seemed very much like opening up a photo album of when you've been in a long-term relationship with someone, like, oh, it used to be so good, and I still love the person, but I'm not sure if I want to stay here or not. And I want to get your thoughts on all of this now that we've had a couple of weeks to mull everything over. Are you in the same boat as us? Are you still a bit torn between how to feel about it all?
I am very much torn with how to feel about it all. I think we didn't even have that much time to process. And I do agree where you said that it might be, it's so random for the Lewis Hamilton news to be released a day after, Andretti's bid got rejected. And I barely had time to process it at all because I was pretty sad as well because I want to see Formula One thrive. I have to say, over the years, it has gotten a lot boring. I mean, and as a person who didn't start liking Formula One until I was around maybe like 12, because I didn't grow up around it. I actually started off with GT. I grew up in Macau in Hong Kong, so that was the type of racing I was watching. And to suddenly, get all the excitement, oh, Andretti, a new team is going to come on. I wonder what's going to happen. And to get that taken away from us as fans. And, Andretti is a well-known, family, a well-known team. They should be in Formula One. And every single person I have interviewed after the news came out, Rob Smedley, Craig Slater, even Christian Lundgaard from IndyCar was like, I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand why they did this.
So Christian Lundgaard, the famous now NFL pundit, doesn't understand what's going on in his own motorsport kind of series that he's kind of involved with on a daily basis. That's how bad it is.
Exactly. And, you spoke about talent earlier as well. And that was one of the topics that we've been talking about, how now IndyCar or even World Endurance Championships, they're getting all of these, ex-Formula 2, Formula 3 drivers because there is no space in Formula 1 for them.
And as well, on top of that, it's not even adding that many more. It's just another couple of seats, but it's still crucial that happens in the first place, because even if we got another 2 teams and there was another 4 seats, they're still incredibly valuable. And like Jacob was saying earlier, if you didn't have these small teams that came in and were able to try in the past, and regardless of how well they did, you wouldn't have necessarily had drivers like Ricciardo, like Alonso with Minardi, like Keke Rosberg back in whenever he was there, 80s, I want to say 70s, 80s. It all kind of blurs after a point. I'm getting the year right, but it's kind of, you should be allowed to try, and it seems ridiculous if in 10, 20 years time we look back and think, how did a team like that get in, but Andretti, Cadillac, one of the biggest kind of combination powerhouses in the world and in motorsport history, can't get into that. And like you say, it's been a couple of weeks and we've still not had enough time to process. But with the rejection itself, Jacob, you poured over a lot of this. I've poured over a lot of this. So I'll get to us in a second. So I'm going to throw it straight back to you, Chiara. Have you read the reasonings that they've given? And if so, what were your thoughts? Yes.
I'll wait for this.
I think both of you have the same reaction as I had.
There's the clip for the podcast. I'm just going to have that reaction with no speech whatsoever. Like, this is exactly how we all feel.
Use it as you want it. I wasn't very happy with it at all because I study communications, and that kind of reasoning and formulating it the way they said it, it's literally saying, hey, we add value to you, but you don't do anything for us, so bye. We don't want you here with us. It's high
Seems
school.
very Mean Girls.
I don't know how else it's high school. I don't know how else to describe it, but that was just like saying, okay, we're not bothered. We don't really care. We don't want you here. This is what we're going to put out to the world. It didn't show that much effort, and frankly, didn't explain much things other than no, Formula One is exclusive. We don't want anyone joining the club.
That was what I just said. No, that's it, and save themselves hours of typing. But obviously, that wouldn't be very good PR-wise. But still, yeah.
That was the curious thing for me. It felt like a lot of the points were just repetitive and just using
it's ChatGPT.
Well, it kind of felt like someone in the department had an English degree that they've not been able to use since getting it, and just thought, how many different ways can I say the same thing and make it a longer document rather than actually saying anything of substance?
It literally smacked of, you're sitting there, it's an hour to the deadline of your uni hand in, and you're just literally there trying to meet the word count.
That's hitting a bit too close for home right now for someone.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course. Sorry for the reminder.
I'm just getting the reasonings up here, some of them, because as part of the therapy that I needed for this other day, I did write up an entire article on about why Andretti and F1 have got to this stage of the game, shall we say. And whilst I'm waiting for that to load, part of me wants to ask you two if your opinions on this. Do you think that, which again is a curious thing if it's true, but do you think F1's intimidated by Andretti and Cadillac coming into this? Is that why they're being so namby-pamby about
it? Yes, slightly. And this is where it confuses me, and I'm sure we'll touch on it in greater detail in a minute. But it's an American brand with General Motors, and Andretti's a brand regardless of whether General Motors are on board or not. Obviously, very successful team. They've literally won another FIA series in Formula E last year. And it does seem that lack of competition that F1 once strive to have has gone. It doesn't really seem like they want to upset the bigger boys, so to speak, in the series amongst Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, and others. It seems they're very happy with what they've got. All teams now are making money, which before they didn't. And I think it not so much competitively, but certainly financial competitiveness. I think they're very worried about sharing more of a certain pie, not realising that the pie will get bigger with new fans coming on board and new sponsors coming on board, and Gamebridge and Guggenheim partners, to name a few that would be involved there at Andretti. I think they're scared, and certainly scared of the teams, because the teams have been throwing their weight around like petulant school children, saying, no, we don't want this, and no, we don't think this is good, and giving, I'm going to swear now, bullshit reasons about how teams won't be able to fit in the paddock, and how the logistical reasons, and how it's going to be very hard for them. We found it hard when we came into F1. I think certain teams down the bottom will be scared. Like Haas certainly should be scared, because if I were F1, I'd say, right, it's time for you to literally start picking up, or we'll start threatening you, kick you out. But there's a few teams at the bottom there I think are certainly worried.
I think part of it, like you said before, it's this thing of not wanting to share the pie without realising that if they did this correctly, yes, it would be split another way, but you could make even more money out of it. So whilst it looks on paper that you've got a smaller piece, that piece is more valuable than the piece you got previously. And as you're saying about F1 being all about innovation, taking risks, and all these sorts of things, it just kind of go in the face of that. And you're thinking, well, why are you not taking on this challenge? It seems perfect for
I
what you're all meant to be really good at.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And I do think as well, F1 has been in a status quo for a long time, and as much as we've loved it over the years, and Chiara, you said it as well, it has got quite boring and quite stale with the same teams around the same positions every year. We haven't had someone since Braun coming and having that remarkable season in 2009. I think F1 are worried, and maybe stupidly so, that if someone like Andretti had come along and started challenging for a title straight away, it would look very maybe amateurish and silly for F1 that anyone can come along and do it because F1's perceived to be hard, but not realizing that that is the story that sports fans, whether you like football, whether you like golf, rugby, darts, whatever it may be, you like those underdog stories. And as a pub chat episode, I'll put a little football background into it as well. The Leicester City story years ago, a team that came from nowhere, survived relegation, had players that literally come from park football, not even professional football, and won the Premier League. So I think
There's
that
hope
is a
for me yet.
little gold mine. If Andretti turned up and won a race, got a podium, got that points finish in Monaco, and there's stories to be created for generations down the line. And without these entries into Formula One, we're just simply going to have the same stories. Okay, the Hamilton to Ferrari is quite romantic, but that was a small bit of good and positive news in a series really now that is the same thing kind of happens every year really.
And Kiara, I wanted
That's
to
competitive
come.
sports as well. I was just gonna say that's what you want in a competitive sport. Like everyone's getting so comfortable in a sport, like you said, that you need innovation. You want to be better. When everyone's just stuck in their own same positions, then nothing's gonna happen. We're just gonna keep seeing the same thing over and over again. I don't want to spend my money on that. That's for sure.
No, and I think Haas. Well, you
Exactly.
look at Haas this example. They've got, they've literally come out and admitted that we're going to turn up to Bahrain and we're going to be 10th. And they're picking up the sponsor money. They're picking up they'll pick up the money at the end of the season for wherever they finish. They've probably pleased sponsors because most teams are making money now. They're meeting the budget cap requirements. They've got drivers who there'll be sponsorships coming in that way as well. So certainly for Hulkenberg. So they don't seem bothered, and it's I think they needed those teams at the bottom certainly needed Andretti to make them pick up their game because at the moment they don't seem like they want to do anything apart from Williams, I'd say, on that front.
And going back to I was going to use air quotes, but both my hands are full for reasoning. I'll come to you for this one, Chiara. Part of it was the whole idea of that whilst GM is capable of creating a power unit in due course for Andretti to use, it's difficult, and most of the attempts to establish a new construction last several decades have not been successful. So essentially saying, oh, it's a bit tricky, and whilst you can maybe do it, you just shouldn't bother trying at all. So bit of an odd message for Formula One to be spreading there of something whereas like in any part of life, if it's difficult, just don't bother trying to do it. It's not worth it.
I have to say, I'm gonna try to keep it PG here, because that was the part that really irked me the most.
Oh, I chose it straight perfectly.
It's like,
Excellent.
like, why even call yourself an innovative sport if you're not going to let that happen? They might as well try. Like, what's going to happen in the future when, technology develops every day? I mean, every day we have new apps for different things. It's the same thing for, Formula One or any other type of sport where you have to have some sort of innovation. There's always something new there. So if they're saying, oh, innovation's hard, where do you want to be? Like,
Yeah, and
what's the point? What's with all the
and
money?
and you think if you applied that to something like Formula E, it would just seem insane because they'd be like, well, they wouldn't have even got from their first season to like a couple of seasons later where they were able to use one car instead of two. It would just been dead in the water. It's like, oh, well, we could maybe do it, but nah, it seems silly to try, so why bother? And then that would have been dead in the
It's
water, and we would have lost one
lazy.
of the most competitive championships that we've got. And yeah, like you say, it's lazy.
With the whole Andretti situation and Formula One obviously trying their hardest to gain American fans, that's not going to work out if Andretti's not going to make it in. I mean, Haas is Haas, Williams is Williams. What else is everyone going to watch? I think if you want those American fans, and I mean, this is what I studied in university, like you have to actually have something of theirs that they can be proud of. And, big, bold statement when I say proud of, because we all know how American fans can be.
No, it's an interesting point you raised there because the article that I mentioned that I did earlier in the week when I was just posting that on LinkedIn as you do, it got way more traction than I expected it to, and people were having a lot of their opinions made public in the comments, and it was very interesting to read a lot of the different things going on there. And like you say, the Americans, they can be very passionate about a lot of things, and one or two of them still in contempt with F1 for the whole Indianapolis debacle, which nearly 20 years ago at this point, which just shows that, yeah, they can hold a grudge for a long time if they want to, but at the same time, they can really but at the same time, looking at that as them getting behind something. And it seemed like such an open goal for them to score with two of the biggest American icons you've got. Like, you look back in history and Cadillac's older than Formula One, and yet Formula One says, oh no, you're not big enough, you're not important enough, you don't bring enough value to us as part of your package deal with a driver team combination that you've got where it's a family legacy, like you say, over 3 generations, where there's a world champion in there. And that was back when F1 was not quite starting out, but really classic Formula One, to then going off and succeeding in several other championships. And in some cases, yes, fair enough, it taking a bit of time to do so, but then building up this experience and this knowledge and know-how to then succeed in these things. And F1 going, oh, but you'd need to compete for podiums and wins. And if you can't do that, it's like, what makes you think they can't do that? Look at literally everything they've done.
It's that, and that's the main thing for me. That's the really, really bad look. And we go back to the General Motors and Cadillac there not being able to provide a competitive package on the engine front. We had Honda, who came in 2015. That engine absolutely sucked when they came in. Paul McLaren in those days, they went over to Red Bull, and by 2021 they'd won a world championship. Then they pulled out, and then Red Bull, with a little bit of Honda help, inevitably, but still, Red Bull sort of got that package together, and they were able to build an engine which we've seen Max Verstappen, pretty much dominate F1 with now. And we saw Aston Martin take over Racing Point, and they did fairly well early on. And I think it just closed the shop for anyone else to want to do it. And I think the going over to the American point, like you say, they do need something to hang on to, and that would be the main thing, the big thing. I think for me that the market over there is so huge, and we've seen how much it's grown with the new American races, and for me, I've looked through and trawled through the comment section of many of the F1 social media, and most of them still now are very angry about it, actually. So I don't think it's going away, which it definitely shouldn't. And hopefully the Hamilton news hasn't buried it totally. But it's just it's sickening, really, the whole narrative around F1. It really is. It certainly wasn't a good look at all.
I think even if you could accept some of the rest of it, one of the worst bits on like a human.
You can accept the rest of it. To be fair, there's nothing on there that you can accept. I don't think.
No, but if you look at it from on a purely human aspect, the damage that F1 did is essentially they made a really nice old man sad, and that's just really shitty. Because just poor Mario, when he came out and just a 2-word tweet, and just like you just feel for him so much there, because this is his life and something that he's obviously competed in, succeeded in at the highest level, and he's at several Grand Prix a year and all the rest of it. And then F1 just turn around and go, you're not good enough for us, and you make this really nice old man sad. It's just like, what's wrong with you? It's just not right. It's you're channeling your inner Toto. It's just not right.
When we interviewed him, I think last year, I'm not sure when that was, but he was definitely with us, and he said he was so adamant about how Andretti was going to make it. He was talking about it as if it was already, confirmed. Like every single stage is already set. They just have to wait for the year. And I'm picturing him in front of me being so proud, telling us that. And now that's been taken away from him too. So that's That's
The
just
only
like
reason
the
I'm
image
laughing is
that
because
popped
it's the
into all of our
alternatives to
heads.
crying because it's just so frustrating and disappointing.
It's so sad. I mean,
Even if the Lewis news buried it for now, as soon as, you know, the race kicks in March, everyone's going to remember again because we're going to have Max Verstappen winning everything, probably going to have Checo or someone from McLaren, either Lando or Oscar, who knows, right behind them. And then we're just going to be bored because we're going to see the same things happen all over again.
pretty much. I think,
And
once
then everyone's going to be like, where's the fun? What's going on? Like, where are the
yeah,
fights?
yeah, and that's what F1 I think have failed to realise. I think they've gone down a really dangerous path here. Actually, I think they're happy with what they have now, and for me, looking at the financial side of it, which Stefano Domenicali and friends seem to want to do more often than not, more often than the racing side. Anyway, I think they're looking at short-term gains, and that's the real worry here because they've made absolute fantastic gains in certain areas. I think their quarter-on-quarter returns are just growing year by year. The amount of race tickets they're selling is just increasing, and the prices, well, mainly because the prices are going up, let's be honest. But they're starting to now lose a few fans in certain sectors. I know the market in Germany for TV viewership's fallen off. Sky had a reduction in viewership this year, and certainly some of the European markets.
Yeah, the drop off in viewership across essentially multiple regions and not just kind of like in small ways, but just very noticeable ways. You'd think that, again, I'm not a business specialist or anything, but in order to keep the product appealing to new fans, especially in a market that you've struggled for your entire history as a sport to really crack. I mean, just read about how many different circuits in America they had to go to before figuring it out and how long that took. You'd want to then make sure that they stay, especially when you've invested as much as you have in Las Vegas, for example, which that's a whole other conversation. Chiara shaking her head there. We're going to get to that at some point. I feel like that's a separate thing. You'd think that getting an American outfit that is actually an American outfit in America with essentially they guarantee one American driver, which is probably going to be Colton Herta. It just seems like such an obvious slam dunk. So why would throw back to Bedrick? Why does that seem such a silly notion? Because again, even in the short term, that seems like an obvious win.
It seems like an obvious win now. It seems like an obvious win in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, however long you want to look at it. F1 have to hope, I think, and we all hope as fans, but F1 have to hope they have a really good season this year because the naysayers are going to be there, more prominently than they were even this season because, like Chiara, as soon as Max Verstappen starts winning, as soon as Haas, 5 seconds of drift back, and as we see people in their normal kind of positions without anything interesting happening, then people will be like, well, we had the chance for Andretti. And, if it doesn't pick up in the next few years, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the viewership that has dropped off will just continue to drop off. And people or onlookers will look to other series that have really picked up. Actually, I've started to watch MotoGP again, for example. I know WEC is fantastic at the moment, going through certainly a golden era for them with the amount of new teams that they've accepted. I mean, bloody hell, they've accepted a whole roster of teams. That series is going from strength to strength, and then obviously Formula E Thiemo as well is very competitive to say the least. So I think certainly for me, and we found out over the last few years, there are other options out there as well. So if F1 can't deliver anymore, well, bye-bye. Everyone will just go elsewhere, I think.
I think at the risk of causing ever so slight offence here, it's at the point where, and nothing against it as such, but it's just never been my cup of tea until semi-recently. I watched the new NASCAR documentary the other week and found myself somewhat binging it and thinking, am I actually considering watching this instead of Formula One? What is going on with my life? Something's weird is going on here, and yeah, it's kind of like you were saying earlier, Cara. I don't know how to process that. Never mind everything else on top of it. So it's a mad time for this, and I kind of want to use your expertise as you were saying about communications earlier. When you saw all these reasonings coming out from F1 and Liberty and the way they were presented, the style and the wording of it all, what does that tell you about what they're thinking about it all? Because you'd think that for an organization as big as that and as powerful as that and as influential as that, and again, no offense against us, but for little old us to be able to blast away their points pretty easily without too much thought, doesn't say much good for them.
obviously they're hiring the wrong people to do their bidding. That's that's literally all I'm going to say, because, if you want to still show respect, and Andretti does deserve a lot of respect considering the history and what they're doing for the motorsport community in general. Like, let's not think about Formula One for a second. Let's think about everything else Andretti are involved with. They deserve a longer statement than that. And it just shows the lack of care, maybe the lack of understanding the people who are running these decisions, who are making them, and even the communications team. Like, obviously they don't know what they're dealing with. It just gave me the impression that it's being run by children. And that's not good PR at all. That hurt my heart. That hurt my PR heart. And I was like, if they only hired me, I would have done a much better statement. That it would still hurt me to be having to write that
You'd
statement
be
as
crying
a
as you wrote it,
motorsport
but
fan.
you do a better job of it.
Exactly. I'd be crying, but I'd make sure that I do them justice and actually explain to the fans, like, even if you have to lie about it. Like, here's the thing about PR. Even if you have to lie about something, you have to make it good. Don't just brush it off and hope and sweep it under the rug and hope for the best. Because in the day and age that we live in, where everyone's picking what they see online, you best bet that you will get a lot of backlash if you don't do a good job.
No, definitely, and you see that so much these days. It's very interesting to see how quickly people can turn when you do something good and you get applauded for it, and then as soon as you get something wrong, you're immediately chastised for it, and in a lot of cases, rightly so, because of either just lazy content creating or just really you thought that was a good idea. I mean, I'm thinking Hindra there for their recent stuff that they're probably hoping we all forget about as well, but we won't do that right now. But yeah, like you say, it's this. It just confuses you because like you say, on one hand, and again, no offense to you here, but it seems weird that you could do a better job than this massive global corporation whose business this literally is to do this sort of thing to the highest possible standard. And the whole thing is just so. I think that's what the main thing is so difficult for everyone to get their head wrapped around, is that no one's necessarily surprised that the decision went against it. We kind of expected it in some ways with how F1 has been over the last few years, but it was just the way in which it was done feels like that extra unnecessary stab in the gut that really wasn't necessary.
At the end of the day, that's what you will remember, because you have to think about the audience, and that motorsport fans are very passionate because it is a niche compared to football, compared to the NFL, or even rugby. It's a very small community, even though it may not seem that way. So if something like this comes out and you use that kind of wording, it's not gonna sit well with everyone, especially I'm probably gonna get like called out on this, but like OG fans. Because I still separate, Drive to Survive fans and OG fans, but I do believe everyone are fans. Like, I'm not gonna say you're not a fan if you started off with Drive to Survive, because these are the kind of things that we want in order, for Formula One to gain that audience. But now, you've got this audience, but what are you gonna do about it?
Well, I think you raise an interesting point there because, like you say, you can see with certain decisions that F1 have made over the last few years, they are perhaps more tailored to pleasing those newer fans, those Drive to Survive fans, as you say. Like, maybe that's why we have some of these new street circuits. Maybe that's why we've had sprint races and all the different variations within that. And that's a way to keep those fans entertained, whereas it's annoyed some of us original fans, as you say. And you're like, stop messing with the recipe. It's perfectly fine as it is. But then this decision, you'd think, well, that's not actually making anyone happy, aside from you, because you are just getting to keep everything as it is perfectly for you without actually thinking about what would be best for the sport. Because, like I said near the top of this, it's one of those curious things that everyone who's a fan of the sport in its purest form can't wrap their head around, and they agree with each other that Andretti should have been let in. And going back to some of the comments that I was reading the other day, it was interesting to see that some people were debating various bits and pieces, but they'd be saying, "Oh, I can understand why F1 did the decision they did, but I still would rather Andretti were there. So it's like, even with the people that are more sympathetic, they still don't give a pass if Andretti are P10 for 3 years solid, if it means that they get to be there and they've got the chance to do it. And I think that's, like you were saying earlier, Jacob, is what F1 is completely misjudged and underestimated.
I think we're in a very interesting position here. And Chiara, you mentioned the OG fans versus the Drive to Survive fans, and I think we're seeing a sort of amalgamation between the two. I think a lot of the thoughts that we older fans have are sort of mirroring the thoughts of the newer fans as well. And I think the newer fans are getting more on board with the fact that Liberty maybe aren't there for their best interests either. I think, who are the street circuits there to please? Are they there for the newer fans? That's what they want us to think. But realistically, I think they're there for shareholders and stakeholders' back pockets. And once they get all of the fans in a position where we're sort of united on one front, arguing one point, then F1's really on the back foot. And I think that's what's happening now. Is 90% of the responses I see, of the comment sections, of the conversations I have online, of the conversations I have down the pub, where I just talk to people who know motorsport, have said this is a ridiculous decision. They've said it's a ridiculous decision that we're getting rid of classic tracks, that we might not have Spa anymore, that we might have a circuit in Chicago, that we have Miami, that we have Las Vegas. So I think that once F1 starts to realise this, will we see a change? The pessimist in me says no, because the money is too much now. F1 has made far too much money in the last few years to go back. I think it's going to get worse before it maybe gets better, but I'm not sure. And F1 will probably hope that once I get totally bored, because I said to you, Thiemo, before this pre-season that, I'm on tenterhooks right now. I don't know. I said to you, I don't know if I'm going to watch Bahrain. I'm not going to watch it now. I've got other plans. I'm not sure if I'm going to bother with all 24 races because it's too much. I'm not going to bother with the sprint races because, again, I'm not interested. And I probably won't bother with the races, in Miami and wherever else, because if Max wins by 30 seconds in a track that I don't care about, what's there for us? So, and I think once more fans feel that way, which they will do, then I think F1 will live to regret their decisions. And if they don't, then there's something seriously quite wrong with them.
I think if we get to the end of the season and I've watched every Grand Prix, I'm not going to include the sprint races because I've got a strategy for those, because they're just a pain in the ass to watch as they go. If I've watched all the Grand Prix live, or at least mostly live, then I think I'm just must have Stockholm syndrome at that point, because something else has got to have happened between now and Bahrain to turn me around to think that this is a natural thing for me to do, which sounds just so bad because I really want to. I feel like, going back to the marriage analogy that you and I do a lot on with F1, Jake, I feel like I'm just like, oh, but she's trying to change. I've got to give her one more go, and maybe this time it'll work out. But she's also just there, just stabbing me slowly in the back, and I'm just like, it's fine. It's totally fine.
I mean, maybe we'll give it a chance because it's Valentine's Day today and we'll buy some flowers and chocolate. But tomorrow I think we're going to go back to our usual selves and think, actually, the honeymoon period's over again for another year. We'll go back to square one and time to hire a marriage counsellor, I think, Thiemo.
And she's called IndyCar. Does lead me on to my last. Oh yeah. Chiara's already having full-blown affair with IndyCar.
I have. Not just IndyCar, but I'm in Germany right now,
getting worse.
so I'm 4 hours away from the I'm 4 hours away from the Nürburgring. I'm 2 hours away from Hockenheim, and I spend most of my time there with DTM, with just random people who are there to drive their cars around the Nordschleife, for example, which is very historical, and I have much more fun watching these sports cars hit each other and them fighting each other at the paddock than watching Formula One and them modeling around. Like, don't get me wrong, okay? I find, as a woman, I have to say, I find the drivers cute too. That's fine. But I don't want to see them posing around in the paddock. I want to see them fighting each other and really getting cutthroat. I mean, it's a competitive sport.
Yeah. We haven't had a fight in the paddock for a long time. Where's Chem Bollock Bassie's dad when you need him, if you remember that one, Thiemo?
How could I forget?
Oh no, it's I think it would. Yeah, I mean, if there was a fight in the paddock, I'm sure the viewership would go up. And I don't know what F1 needs. Well, we do know what it needs. It needs Andretti and less street circuits. But until
Well, you were saying it needs
I
Andretti. I was thinking it needs a certain small, mousy-haired looking individual that definitely doesn't ever get into any trouble of any kind. But maybe he's looking at all this and thinking, "Christ, what a mess," and that's him saying it.
and I'm sure we're thinking it as well. But we do need something back like that. Just someone who takes charge and says, you know what, we're going to give it a go. Because that's what Bernie did. We're not going to go into a Bernie love fest now, although it is, as I said, Valentine's Day. But I do feel with him, although some of the things he did were not necessarily right, some of the things he said, weren't right. And, he's been criticised rightly for that. But I think he did things I genuinely believe, and this might be controversial, people can come at me in the comment section, they can disagree with what I say, but I think he genuinely did things with the sport's best interest at heart. And yes, I think he had people in the FIA that messed with things as well. Certainly the Max Mosley relationship didn't help, and there was always infighting within teams and politics within F1. We nearly had F1 disband during Bernie's reign, and it was sort of saved
that's the thing that,
hour,
like you say, he always tried doing stuff with best intentions, even if it didn't turn out that way. It's kind of like, this isn't the way to go about doing this, but at least your motive and your heart is probably in the right place. And yeah, you happen to be making a crap ton of money off the back of this as a result of it. But that is just you being smart at the end of the day, and that shouldn't be looked down upon in some ways. Whereas now it feels like they're just doing it for the sake of their own self-interest rather than for the good of the sport. If that happens to line up with the good of the sport, then that's a great coincidence for them. But if it genuinely isn't like that, then like you were saying, Chiara, their communication to their PR, it's really not coming across as that. And that is where it's going to fall down a lot for them, and where their issues are going to be just growing and growing as this keeps going on.
I'm certainly going to use a quick analogy here, just jumping in here. But I think with the whole, we'll leave Bernie alone in a second, and we'll move on to something else, because I'm sure not everyone wants to hear his name again. But I think with him, it's a case of better the devil you know than the devil you don't. And what we knew with him was, slightly controversial, of course, but he allowed for new teams to join the grid whenever there was an application filed. We had 3 new teams join in 2010. We had Haas come in under his leadership. We had Toyota join, a completely new Toyota Works outfit with a new factory, not just a takeover. We had Malaysia come in, which was a really popular race. We had other things that came in. And although some of the things that he did weren't great on the double points, was pretty bad actually into the 2014. But, he tried a new a qualifying format in 2016. And after 2 races in, he turned around and said, actually, yeah, this is shit. And then we went back to the current non-sprint format we have now. So, they could certainly take a leaf or 2 out of his book anyway.
I'll come and throw it to you then, Chiara. If Andretti Cadillac aren't able to get into F1 now, will they be able to in the future? And if they can't, can anyone? Or is this just a closed shop?
I have an eerie feeling, and I think I told you about this, that the only way Andretti could come in is if they buy out one of the teams. And I think I told you it was Haas, that they might actually have to buy out for that. You weren't too convinced on that one, though.
No, it wasn't that I wasn't convinced. It was more, I just don't want that to be how they get in, because then we still don't gain another team.
I don't think anyone wants that.
It's kind of like, as much as we love to ridicule Haas, we still want them there because they offer 2 seats, and you don't want to just swap out. You don't want to just change the name on the door. You want that to be another garage. You want that to be another team. You want that extra bit of competitiveness, because even if we don't lose a lot of sleep in theory, we'd potentially lose some sleep if Haas left, because it would be sad, because you think maybe there's still potential there. We've seen potential from them over their years in the sport. It's just never come together for them properly, but we know it's doable because we've seen other small teams come and do it before. Not every small team has come in and failed. So to see them just get bought out by Andretti and that be their way in, for me, it would just be feeling like you found a cheat code on a video game. It's not as satisfying to do it that way.
Yeah, but then we'd have to wait for a long time before that can happen, unless someone in F1 just decides and says, okay, I think we really need to change. I think all the fans have to collectively stop buying merchandise, buying those tickets, subscribing to F1 TV, for that to happen, for them to realize something. Because right now they're swimming in money.
Jacob,
Yeah,
same kind of opinion there, or I mean,
yeah, very
I'm
much.
not expecting you to be optimistic. What am I thinking anyway?
Yeah, you know me. I can't be optimistic even if someone paid me to do it. So if F1 chucked me some money and quite a lot of money, like they do, then maybe. But yes, they're going to need to. They're going to need to buy a team, and I think, like you said, Thiemo, it won't be as exciting. Obviously, Audi are coming in 2026, but they're only taking over Sauber, so I'm not too excited about that. Really, yes, they
Well,
have
that
their
was
own
an
fan.
interesting thing actually, because when they got announced, I remember us talking about it. I think again, you just put me to finding out about it by 5 minutes or something, and I was like, oh, Audi. I saw like the top of the message being Audi's joining F1. I was like, excellent, new team. I was like, oh, taking over Sauber. Never mind, I'm not excited now because it's just swapping your
Yeah,
name in and out. I was like,
yeah.
wait, oh, we were that close, and I don't care now.
It's kind of like Aston Martin coming into F1. Yes, the name comes in, but they're just taking over Racing Point. So
I think
if
at that point
Andretti
we were
come in,
just glad that Racing Point were getting some consistency.
yeah. Um, I
Mm.
think with this, if they take over Haas, for example, then they have to take over certain facilities. They have to retain some of the staff. It wouldn't be as successful. And like you say, it's just scrubbing the name of Haas and putting Andretti there. It's like, yeah, we've still got 10 teams. Some people will still call them Haas, probably because that's how they remember it. Like we still call RB, Cash App, something or another, Toro Rosso. That's how people remember it. Like they call them Minardi still, for example. So if they want to get in, I think they're going to have to buy. They tried with Sauber before Audi bought them out, and Sauber turned around and said, "No, we're not selling to you." Until Audi potentially offered them more money, unless they didn't want to sell to them. They've tried at Haas, I think, or certainly asked questions, and no one's selling there. Williams certainly aren't selling, and none of the other teams are for sale. And the value that the teams are making is reaching £1 billion now. It's certainly inflated, I would say, artificially by my limited economics knowledge, but they're certainly creating the closed shop effect for a faux rise in value. That's certainly what I think is happening anyway. So therefore, teams won't be able to have the money to buy them anyway. So they'll just continue making money between themselves as 10 teams, and they say, actually, well, yeah, you can come and buy one of us. And then they turn around and say, when push comes to shove, and Andretti say, right, here's the money. We're not for sale now because Gene Haas is happy making the money he's making. And that's the only way I see them getting in. There was the slight little carrot dangled by F1 saying, well, maybe 2028 question mark if all's well and good. But what's to say in 2028 that the can is kicked down the road to 2030? They're not going to say yes then, I don't think. As they've not said yes now, I don't know what is going to change.
Yeah, no pressure on you for this at all, but can we find some kind of optimistic note to end this podcast on?
An optimistic note to end this podcast on. Well,
The sheer nature of the questioning of that from you makes me think 50-50.
I'm going to try to be optimistic here because, well, it's always okay to have a tiny bit of optimism, even though I'm with Jacob
Well,
on
we're all
this one
Ferrari
with the
fans, aren't we? So we know what
pessimistic
that's like.
sides. Are we all Ferrari fans? I did not know that.
Everyone's a Ferrari fan, Chiara. Come on.
Everyone is.
Deep down,
Well,
it's there in you. I know it is.
I'm going to dig deep down and say, considering the season we had last time, where we've been seeing Oscar Piastri, for example, or even the comeback story of McLaren after that horrible start to the 2023 season. I'm pretty sure Zach Brown is out for blood, and we're going to see McLaren try their best to chase after Max Verstappen, and I don't see any other driver doing that other than Lando Norris. So I'm hoping that season, well, this is my opinion. You both don't look too sure about that, all of us. Still my opinion.
Optimistic for my
I'm trying to stay as neutral as I am. Like, Because if it was up to me, I would say Carlos Sainz will be chasing, but let's be real, that's probably not going to happen. So I think other teams such as, even Ferrari and McLaren are going to try to put up more of a fight. And we might actually see some fighting against Max, but who knows?
I
They've
think
been
as long
quite
as it's
rattled
not
at
the
Red Bull.
runaway season that we had last year, and even if it's still Max and Red Bull out front, if that gap, and this is really clutching at straws for us, I know, but if that gap is just a decent bit smaller, then we can at least be not extremely disappointed come the end of the season and think that this has been somewhat worthwhile.
We're really selling the season here, folks.
I know it's turned into, I suppose, a season preview, but in terms of Andretti, then it's sort of, I suppose the weird hope for us is that we do have a season like last season, because if we get that, is that the price that we have to pay to see then if F1 and Liberty realize, oh, we maybe jumped the gun on this and might have to rethink this, because in the meantime, like you were saying earlier, Jacob, Andretti and Cadillac, they're still ploughing on with making sure that they've exhausted every avenue before they definitely call it quits for this. And in the meantime, are going to probably still pump some money and resources into getting ready for 2026, just in case, because like you say, Chiara, it can't hurt rather to have a little bit of hope.
I think they say work continues at pace, and for one, I believe them. I don't know how far it's going to get them. I don't think this is certainly over, because obviously the FIA said yes, FOM said no, so that'll be I'm sure another pub chat Thiemo one day where we do the whole FOM versus FIA drama shenanigans. But we'll see what happens from here on in. There will be some potential court cases. Who knows? I'm sure they'll look at that avenue. I don't think F1's going to change their opinion without some legal pressure somewhere. So that will have to happen. I don't know what's going to happen from here on in. I can't really call it. Andretti are going to try. F1 are going to still push back. The FIA might get involved. How much power do they have? It all comes down to the Concord Agreement, I think, at the end of the day. And I'll keep this short and sweet because I don't want to ramble on, because I'm sure we could talk at length even longer about this, because there's so much more to delve into. But, there's a new Concord Agreement in 2026. The FIA have to give F1 permission to go forward with this. And obviously they'll have to come to some sort of agreement. At the moment, it says 12 teams. We know that teams have to pay £200 million to force an entry. I think that this will increase somewhat to £800. £800? I mean, we could get involved, Thiemo. £800 million.
I like our chances.
We'll think of a team name later. And then, that might force teams that might put teams off because it's too expensive. Or, as I have heard a little whisper here and there from, I don't know how true it is, but, you hear a lot of whispers this time of year, certainly in F1, that they might close it down to only 10 teams as part of the Concord Agreement, which means Andretti wouldn't be able to get in anyway because, well, there's no space for you because legally that's how many teams we have on a grid now. So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to say that Andretti, they continue going on, but I think they just ultimately fall short in the end, and they might get some money back on. I think they'll win a court case whereby they get all their costs paid for, and it all ends a bit depressingly, I think. But as a little positive note,
I love how Chiara tried her best there to go and leave us on a positive note, and you just smashed it all back down again.
You did invite me on for a reason. Little positive note to end it on. We've not mentioned it yet. I actually like this news. The British Grand Prix staying for another 10 years. I mean, that's one thing I can get behind.
That's true. We did everybody loved that good news. And in a period of the first couple of months of the year where it's been all over the place in terms of F1 news, at least we've got that going for us. So that's, whilst not Andretti related, we'll take it. And hopefully, maybe I'll be the bold, optimistic one. I can say that within those 10 years, we'll get Andretti on the track. And I don't just mean as one of the individuals doing the grid walk. I mean as an actual team with a car and everything. But there we go. Like you say, we could talk about this all day and all night, as we would do at an actual pub. And maybe the three of us will get around to doing that at some point. And God help the pub that we choose in question, because we will not leave until we've exhausted every avenue of conversation.
That's a change a little lock-in.
Exactly.
Change the barrels ourselves.
But unless either of you two have any other points that you want to raise before I wrap?
No, not really, apart from F1, sort your shite out.
And there's another clip for the podcast when I put this up. Yeah, well, on that bombshell, essentially, that is all we've got time for this edition of On the Kerbs Pub Chat. Chiara, thank you very much for being on here. It's been lovely to have you and to get your thoughts on all of this. And hopefully you'll be back at some point in the future. Always welcome in this pub.
Thank you for having me. It was fun. I had to get that off my chest too, actually, now that you guys say that with the
See, it's
therapy
nice,
session.
isn't it?
Yeah. It
Do you
is.
feel calmer is the question?
No.
Her anger's potentially more focused now, which is potentially a good and a bad thing, depending on who it's directed at.
Mhm.
And Jacob, always a
Not
pleasure,
calm
never a
at all.
short. You know that you co-owned the pub with me essentially, so maybe we'll get around to making it a real one at some point. And in the meantime, details of where you can find all three of us will be in the description of this episode, so do go and check that out if you want more from any of us. Let us know your thoughts as well in the comments, because I'm sure you've got a couple. And in the meantime, thank you very much for listening, and some of us, will be back soon with another episode.